Okay, so are you ready for this? We're diving into America's scariest cities. A whole ranked list someone put together, and it's got everything. Haunted jails, spooky lighthouses, even ghost towns. I'm already getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
It's really interesting, isn't it, how these places, they just kind of grab our imagination, tap into that fascination we have with things we can't explain.
Totally. It's not just about ghosts either, right? It's the history, the mysteries, all those stories that just kind of linger.
Absolutely. And it's not just any stories either. It's like the darker the history, the more we're drawn in.
Which brings us to our first stop on the spooky road trip, Charleston, South Carolina. Now, I know what you're thinking, Charleston, with the southern charm and all that, but trust me, our sources found a darker side lurking underneath.
Yeah, Charleston, it's got this complex history, being a major port during the slave trade. That's bound to leave some darkness behind. A lot of its ghost stories, they're really tied into that, especially the ones about the old city jail.
Oh man, that place is meant to be something else. It housed some of the city's most notorious criminals, including, and this is where it gets really creepy, Lavinia Fisher, America's first female serial killer. I mean, what makes her story so chilling, even after all these years?
Well, think about it. Back then, a woman like Lavinia, she was breaking all the rules, not just accused of horrible crimes, but just defying what a woman was supposed to be like back then. That kind of clash societal expectations versus this brutal reality, it makes her story stick with you.
It's like her defiance, her energy, is just woven into the walls of that jail. They say visitors have heard whispers, seen shadowy figures that look just like her.
It's almost as if certain places, they hold on to the energy of the past. Whether it's really paranormal activity or our minds filling in the blanks, those stories become part of the experience.
Okay, speaking of places with powerful stories, our next stop, Salem, Massachusetts. I mean, even just saying the name Salem, you think witch hunts, trials, executions.
Yeah, Salem is a perfect example of how one event can brand a place for centuries. The Salem witch trials, that was a dark chapter, no doubt. Fueled by fear, paranoia, all that. And you know what? Even today, it just keeps fascinating us.
It's like the energy of that mass hysteria, it just never left, especially on Gallows Hill. That's where a lot of those accused witches, they were hanged there.
It makes you wonder, what is it about these places that we find so compelling? Is it morbid curiosity? Like wanting to connect with the past? Or is it something deeper? Some subconscious pull toward the darkness we're capable of?
It's a lot to process, and I know this might sound crazy, but do you think any of those accused in Salem actually had supernatural powers? Or was it all just, like you said, mass hysteria, false accusations?
That's the million-dollar question. It's impossible to know for sure. And that mystery, that's part of what makes it so intriguing. Were these people really witches? Or were they just caught in the crosshairs of fear, of manipulation?
Makes you think. These haunted places, they're not just scary stories, are they? They remind us of the darker parts of ourselves, of how powerful fear and belief can be.
They sure do. And as we continue this road trip, it's only going to get wilder. Our next stop, well, it's practically synonymous with haunted New Orleans. This city is drenched in mystery, music, and this incredible mix of cultures.
No, New Orleans.
Voodoo, vampires, haunted hotels, cemeteries, you name it, New Orleans has got it. But the story that really sent shivers down my spine, the LaLaurie Mansion. Let me tell you, this Madame LaLaurie was something else.
Oh yeah, Delphine LaLaurie. Her cruelty towards her slaves, it was horrific. The accounts we have are disturbing enough on their own, but then you add in the rumors, hidden chambers, torture devices, the sounds of screams and moans that people still claim to hear today.
Oh, see, now that's just too creepy. You mentioned New Orleans being this blend of cultures. Do you think that plays into how intense the LaLaurie Mansion's reputation is? Absolutely. New Orleans is this unique mix. French, Spanish, African, Caribbean influences, each with their own ideas about the afterlife, about spirits. You put it all together and you've got this breeding ground for folklore and supernatural beliefs. It's woven into the city's very identity.
It's like the city itself amplifies these stories. Speaking of amplified experiences, our next stop is sunny Florida, but don't let that sunshine fool you, yeah? St. Augustine is said to be teeming with restless spirits.
St. Augustine, they say it's the oldest city in the U.S., so it's bound to have some ghost stories, right?
Makes sense. Older the city, the more history, the more chances for things to get, well, spooky.
Exactly. And with that much history, it's no surprise there are stories about restless spirits.
And out of all the spooky spots in St. Augustine, the one that really gets me is the St. Augustine Lighthouse. Like, lighthouses are already kind of creepy, but this one. Our sources mention children being sighted there.
Oh, children's ghosts. There's something about them that's just, I know, hits differently.
Right. It's like extra unsettling. And it's not just seeing them either. People report phantom laughter, like echoing down the spiral staircase, and shadowy figures in the tower windows. No thanks.
You, me both. Lighthouses in general, I mean, they've got that eerie vibe, standing alone against the ocean. They've seen it all. Shipwrecks, storms, isolation. It's like our minds just naturally connect them to the supernatural.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, speaking of places with a lot of spooky stories, next up on our haunted road trip is Savannah, Georgia. They don't call it the most haunted city in America for nothing, and our sources back that up.
Savannah, oh man, it's practically drowning in ghost stories, each one more chilling than the last.
It's true. And it seems like every other building has some kind of tragic past.
Well, it's got the history for it. Wars, fires, epidemics. You name it, Savannah's been through it. And it seems like those events, they just kind of left their mark on the city.
I can see that. One place that really stands out is Marshall House. It was a hospital during the Civil War, right? And now it's said to be haunted by the ghosts of wounded soldiers.
Hospitals, battlefields, those places see a lot of suffering, death. It's no wonder people think those emotions, that energy, it might stick around.
It's like the walls themselves absorbed it all. Imagine checking into a historic hotel in Savannah and then boom, ghostly Civil War soldier shows up.
Yikes, that's one way to cut your vacation short.
Right. Though it does make you wonder, do you think some spirits, especially those who died tragically, are they just kind of stuck searching for something they can't find anymore?
That's a question people have been asking for centuries, right? What happens after we die? It speaks to our fear of the unknown, the possibility that our consciousness, it doesn't just end.
It's a lot to think about. Okay, well, since we're on the topic of places marked by tragedy, our next stop is Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And this isn't just a haunted city, it's a whole haunted battlefield. You can practically feel the echoes of that conflict.
Gettysburg is a good reminder that hauntings, they're not always about traditional ghost stories. Sometimes it's the weight of what happened there, the sorrow, the trauma that creates that uneasy feeling.
You said it, like you can practically feel the weight of history there. Our sources mention all sorts of strange phenomena. Disembodied voices, phantom cannon fire, even the feeling of being watched or touched.
Like the land itself remembers what happened there. All those soldiers who fought and died, their energy is just woven into that place.
It's both humbling and terrifying at the same time. Okay, so up until this point, our haunted road trip has been pretty spooky, but this next one surprised me. I wouldn't have thought of Portland, Oregon as a hotbed of paranormal activity.
Yeah, Portland doesn't have the same reputation as, say, Salem or Savannah. But it's got its secrets, too. Like, underneath all that hip and modern stuff, there's this whole network of underground tunnels, the Shanghai tunnels.
Oh, yeah, the Shanghai tunnels. Our sources did not paint a pretty picture of what went on down there. Smuggling, kidnapping, forced labor, it sounds straight out of a nightmare.
The dark side of history, for sure. Proof that even in the most progressive places, there's always going to be a darkness lurking somewhere.
Definitely creepy. Okay, so last stop before we move on from the Pacific Northwest, and this one is a doozy. We're headed to a place where ghost stories meet. Well, something else entirely. Jerome, Arizona. Jerome, Arizona. A ghost town, and I mean that literally. I've always been kind of fascinated by ghost towns. You know, it's like they're frozen in time or something.
There's definitely an allure there, like these snapshots of a bygone era, a reminder that even our most ambitious creations can fade away.
And in Jerome's case, it went from this bustling mining town to practically a ghost town. More spirits than people, I'd bet.
Well, it's the story of a lot of these old West towns, right? Boom and bust. Built on hope, greed, and the pursuit of fortune. But just as quickly as they sprang up, they could disappear.
Yeah, and as the mines dried up and the money went elsewhere, so did the people, leaving behind all these empty buildings, each one with its own story, I'm sure.
And some stories are definitely creepier than others. Like, our sources mentioned the Jerome Grand Hotel. Used to be a hospital. And, well, let's just say it's got a bit of a reputation now.
Oh yeah, the Jerome Grand Hotel. Former hospital perched on a hillside overlooking a town known for tragedy and loss. Sounds like a recipe for a haunting, doesn't it?
It's got all the elements. And people aren't shy about sharing their experiences. Shadowy figures, voices, that feeling of being watched. Some even say they've been touched.
I can see why they call it one of America's scariest cities. It's like the ghosts of Jerome's past just can't let go. Maybe they're drawn to the energy of the living or something.
Maybe. Or maybe they're just stuck, unable to move on from the place they knew in life.
Either way, not a place I'd want to spend the night alone. Speaking of places with big reputations, Alcatraz Island is our next stop, and it needs no introduction.
Alcatraz, notorious criminals, iron bars, isolation. That place has captured imaginations for decades.
It's a symbol of punishment, despair, the darker side of the American justice system for sure.
And if that wasn't enough, it's also considered one of the most haunted places in the country.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not surprised. Think about how many men lived and died within those walls. It's bound to leave a mark, right?
Absolutely. Their stories, their energy, it's woven into the island itself.
Our sources mention visitors hearing things, whispers, footsteps, even full-on conversations, as if the ghosts are trying to make contact or something.
Right. And some have even claimed to hear Al Capone's banjo playing from his old cell.
Al Capone, see, that's what I'm talking about. Decades after Alcatraz closed as a prison, the legends live on.
It's like we can't get enough of these stories. This glimpse into the darker side of human nature, the mysteries that lie beyond our everyday lives.
It's both intriguing and unsettling at the same time. Okay, so for our final stop on this haunted road trip, we're going somewhere different. A place where the paranormal meets something stranger. Sedona, Arizona.
Sedona's interesting. It's got this breathtaking beauty, this undeniable energy. You know, the red rocks, the vortexes, and of course all that Native American lore. It's a place that draws people in.
Vortexes. Okay, before we go any further, what exactly is a vortex?
Good question. They're basically swirling centers of energy emanating from the earth, often found at places with geological significance. And people believe they can do all sorts of things. Amplify your spiritual awareness, promote healing, even help you connect with, well, other realms.
Okay, so we're not just talking about ghosts in Sedona. We're talking interdimensional beings, cosmic energy fields.
That's part of what makes it so fascinating, right? The possibilities, like the boundaries of what we think we know just kind of dissolve a little.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Our sources mention people experiencing some wild stuff in and around Sedona's vortexes. Visions, altered states of consciousness. Some even felt like they were being watched. It definitely makes you wonder, is there something truly extraordinary happening there?
It's like Sedona is a gateway of sorts, a thin place where our world and other realms can kind of bleed into each other.
Well, this haunted road trip has taken us everywhere. From haunted jails and battlefields to a ghost town and now maybe to the edge of another dimension. It's been quite a ride.
It really has. We've journeyed through history, folklore, and those shadowy parts of human experience. It's a good reminder that there's still so much we don't know or understand.
So true. And as we wrap up our deep dive into America's scariest cities, I'm left with more questions than answers, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
And to our listeners, we ask you this. Why are we so drawn to these stories? Is it the thrill of the unknown? Or is there a deeper yearning within us, a need to believe that there's more to life and death than meets the eye?
Something to think about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind. But hey, maybe leave the lights on tonight, just in case.